all you Gretas and Chutezcats out there. Welcome to Unit 2, Section 4 Notes, Tolerance and Limiting Factors. This is page 6 of your unit packet. So range of tolerance. Populations thrive within certain ranges of abiotic factors such as pH, temperature, light, amount of moisture, etc. It depends on the critter, depends on a couple things. So we have our optimal range, and this is where things are very abundant. You have a zone of stress where you have a few species, but not a ton, on either end of the optimum. And then you have your zone of intolerance, and then you have nothing living there. So if you want to think very simply, think temperature. Bugs live at a certain temperature. If it's a little too hot or a little too cold, you might have a couple, but once it gets too hot or too cold, no bugs. Same with any of these other factors. So, there's some questions on your packet that go ahead and try to answer. If you have questions on them, talk to me and we'll see if we can get them answered. But we're skipping down to the bottom where it says limiting factors. A limiting factor is the environmental factor that is most often in short supply. So it's the one that is limiting the organism from being as productive as it could be. Like if you're a chef and you don't have any chocolate chips, you can't make too many chocolate chip cookies. So that would be your limiting factor. So even if all of the other factors are optimum, it's the one that is most likely to regulate plant growth, usually. So some important limiting factors. In soil, so flipping over to page 7, you're filling in the limiting factors. So soil, it's either nitrogen, phosphorus, or potassium. So that's why you can get those NPK testing kits, and that those are usually what is found in fertilizers, both organic and inorganic. But those are easy tests that you can do. But if your soil is missing one of those things and you put it back into the soil, you'll get much better grass, garden, whatever. Open ocean. Sometimes it's nitrogen, silica, or iron. Sometimes it's dissolved oxygen, especially at the surface. If it gets too warm, the oxygen levels go down and then the fish die or go deeper. Freshwater lakes and rivers, it's usually phosphorus. Bays and estuaries, it's the salinity. So these are, you have your freshwater and your saltwater mixing, and so you have critters that can handle salty water, but still if it's too salty or not salty enough, the critters might not be the happiest. All right, so the next couple says fish tank. So what would the limiting factor for this one be? So air bubbles were happy, no air bubbles were sad. So fish tanks, usually if they don't have enough oxygen, the fish will die, which is why having a bubbler in there can help keep your fish much happier. Desert plants, water, and rainforest floor plants. What do you guys think about that one? Sunlight. Because they're on the floor and there's this huge canopy above, it's often hard for enough sun to get down to these plants. So that would be their limiting factor. So going back to pretty much any waterway, if a limiting factor or limiting nutrient is the only thing holding back an algal population, what happens when a lot of it is added at once? And this usually happens when fertilizers that are full of nitrogen and phosphorus get washed into waterways. And we get what is called an algal bloom, which causes other fun and awful things that we'll talk about later this year. So I think, yep, we have survived the notes. So before I go, I want to let each and every one of you know that you are good enough, you are smart enough, and people like you. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good God, do your homework.